Hey neighbor, welcome back to Beyond ARTV. My name is John, and alternative music as of 2019 is a total mess. And I don't mean that in the best way, it's just very confusing for the average music listener out there. If you didn't see it, I did a video a couple of years ago breaking down the differences between alternative and alternative rock music, and dating back to say 2013, the tag has gotten really complicated, and that saw the introduction of an artist like Lorde, or even a band like Imagine Dragons. They broke through not only to the mainstream, but also alternative and even rock radio started to wrap their arms around them. And it left me wondering, why exactly? Because even though I'm not just gonna say this is bad, in fact I like a lot of the artists that were ushered in this new era, I just feel that they're not at all alternative. I'm gonna try and make it as simple as possible to show why I feel that the alternative charts are such a mess, why things are getting miscategorized, and what exactly alternative even means going into our next decade here. If you do enjoy this video, then do me a favor, drop a like on it. It truly does go a long way. And if you happen to be new here, this is your first video, well, welcome to the neighborhood. Hit that subscribe button. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines alternative music as music that is produced by performers who are outside the musical mainstream, that it's typically regarded as more eclectic, original, or challenging than most popular music, such as conventional rock, pop, or even country, and it's often distributed by independent record labels. To make sense of all the loose change laying around in that statement, it essentially means that it is open to interpretation as far as what alternative music means, but it also doesn't mean that it's limitless. And in the 2010s, I feel that so many groups and even artists and what iTunes or Apple Music or Spotify choose to label as alternative has just gone out the window. I mean, it's basically throwing something at a wall and saying, okay, I guess this is alternative now, when it doesn't really sound any different from what's on Top 40. Now, it's not to say that alternative songs can't cross over into the mainstream, because that does happen, but it's much more rare than you'd actually think, especially as of late. As I said, we saw a massive shift around 2013 as far as what alternative was. Lorde had her huge #1 smash all over the world with Royals. Imagine Dragons were really riding out the popularity of songs like Radioactive, and I think the term alternative was really starting to get challenged as far as what people actually accepted. If you turned on a radio station that played alternative rock, as my local station does, 106.5, The End, Charlotte's Alternative Rock, that station comes on and says alternative rock, and then starts playing Judah and the Lion right after. Now don't get it twisted, there are certainly songs from any of the artists that I will mention today, at least the majority of them, that could be categorized as alternative. But where do we draw the line? We'll take a look at some of the recent hits and the recent years that have really been all over alternative and rock radio, but first, I want to break a few other things down. Alternative is definitely a term that lives and breathes differently depending on the decade, and the 2010s are no exception to that. It also doesn't change the fact that, say, Take It All Back by Judah and the Lion or High Hopes by Panic! At the Disco are anything but pop songs. Now, don't get me wrong, pop is not inherently a dirty term. In fact, I like a lot of pop music, but play Take It All Back and listen to the song structure there.
You know, I take it all back, take it all back, take it all back, I take it all back just to have you.
Is there really that much separating the fact that, okay, this is a band, so it's automatically alternative, and what we're hearing on Top 40 stations? The way that the chorus is stylized, the instrumentation, the fact that it's trying to appeal to a very broad audience. It's not to say that alternative music never does that, but if we float back to the definition, it's something that's inherently more eclectic or more challenging to listen to, and Judah and the Lion, not exactly that. Now, I mentioned High Hopes by Panic! At the Disco, which is a pop song. Let's not beat around the bush there, it absolutely is. But it's also holding a little bit of footing in the pop rock door, I suppose I could give it that. But of course, anywhere you see it, it's gonna get nominated for Best Rock Video or Best Alternative Song or Hit or whatever, because Billboard and any other publication doesn't really recognize anything outside of what is getting played on popular radio or streaming services or anything like that. And it further leads to the kind of confusion surrounding the term. And honestly, people at this point, the kids especially, the ones that are sadly misinformed, and it's not entirely their faults, they're looking to something like Melanie Martinez or Panic at the Disco or, God forbid, Halsey and saying, I guess I just am an alternative kid. I guess you probably wouldn't understand because I'm just so deep in the lyrics over here. Come on, alternative? Alternative to what? Listening to Ariana Grande 24/7, 365? It gets a little bit complicated with some of these bands and artists because obviously in the past somebody like Panic at the Disco were known for being an alternative group. Now that's not to say that everything they make is inherently alternative, and it gets tough to categorize that. I get that. But obviously, we can't just say, well, I don't want to put a label on it. That's just like getting friend-zoned and not actually being upfront with someone. What constitutes an alternative song? It doesn't have to be a rock song, although it more than often actually is, at least in some way associated with the genre. Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana, of course, is an early example in the 90s, leading the way in not only grunge, but also alternative. Sex and Candy, The Middle, Dog Days Are Over, Still Breathing, Social Cues. These are all examples of songs that shine in a very different way from each other, but they all fall under the umbrella of alternative. One song uses the ukulele, another a fuzzy guitar line. The one thing that ties them all together though, despite their differences, is the fact that they go out of balance and they step away from that box that a lot of the top 40 mainstream actually puts itself in, a lot of the time at least. I think the mainstream idea is trying to reach as many people as possible, and alternative, indie, or the many hemispheres or subgenres that represent that are something that aren't afraid to shy away from going to deeper topics or things that aren't always discussed. And of course, it can be a familiar subject. I don't want to get this too complicated, but obviously, all of those songs having that in common is something that does keep them together in this bunch of alternative or alternative rock. My beef isn't with the artist that chooses to branch out and try new things, incorporating new styles into their music. It's with them possibly, or even the label or the streaming service, whatever it may be, still classifying it as one thing just because they were identified as that in the past. Are we still gonna call Radiohead a grunge band just because they put out one album in the early 90s that most people aren't going to recognize them for at this point? Artists do evolve and they can change genres. A lot of people have proved that time and time again. Just look at what Poppy is doing at this point. There's still pop in there, but of course, you're probably not going to recognize it quite as much at this point. Let's take a look at some of the biggest hits on the alternative songs charts on Billboard from the past few years, starting with Three Nights by Dominic Fike, a song that's really blown up in 2019. When I first noticed that Three Nights had gone #1 and it stayed there for quite some time, I decided to check the song out for myself, and it's not awful. I also don't think it's very good, but from an objective point of view, it sounds like something that, say, Sublime with Rome or Dirty Heads would have been making for the past 10 years. They stay in the exact same gold mine that they think they've landed themselves in, and it kind of has this breezy atmosphere to it. Yes, there are guitars, but I would say that there's more pop melody here than anything else, and therefore maybe alternative, but it's also really pushing the line at what that actually could be. Burn the House Down by AJR is one of the least alternative hits that I've seen as of recent. AJR are not in the slightest alternative. I feel that they try to pass themselves off as such because, oh, we've got deep lyrics for the Tumblr crowd. Come on, gather round, kids. Imagine Dragons are certainly easy to pick on, but of course, how can I not mention a song like Thunder, which strips away really anything at all that makes them sound alternative or even like a band. It feels like singer Dan Reynolds and then a producer writing out a bassy beat and then a drop and pitch shifted vocals. Now, if we broke this down on its core level, looking at the notes and the music and everything like that, separating it, does it really stand itself apart from anything else that's on the top 40 charts? It's a band, so automatically it's thrown that way, but is it? I say no, it's not alternative at all. The massive swelling hit Bad Guy by Billie Eilish is another prime example that crossed over in recent times. I think that if you look at the core of this song, you'll see, yes, a very catchy swirling synth melody, and obviously some vocals that feel a little bit edgier than normal, I suppose, for top 40, but it's still a pop song in really every sense of the phrase. Now, alternative pop, if that was actually a category that streaming services or really people in general would actually stick to using religiously, I'd probably not even have made this video. But the difference is that nobody ever says alternative pop, at least not very many people. and I'm just hoping to put it out there, like maybe use alternative pop instead of just saying, oh, I listen to alternative music. Oh, like what? Billie Eilish. The last song that I'm gonna mention by name is Trampoline by Shade? Shade? I don't know if that's how it's said.
I've been having dreams, splashing in the summer street.
Yeah, that one. It's not a bad song, although it's a little repetitive for my personal taste, and I'm not exactly a huge fan, but it's not bad at all. It is a pop song, I'm sorry to inform you. Everyone is talking about this great new explosion and alternative getting back into the mainstream, and I hate to burst your bubble, but it's really not, because this, in maybe the slightest sense of the word, or even ironic sense, is yes, alternative because it's a little darker, but pop has been dark for like the past 5 years, so this really isn't anything new other than the fact that it is a band scoring the hit. Do yourself a favor and actually scrub through some of the alternative charts in the past 5 years over on Billboard and see for yourself how the charts one month could be dominated by the likes of Vampire Weekend or Haim or the Black Keys, and then the next it's Halsey and HAR and a weird pop show. At the end of the day, it's not a huge problem. It's not something that we should all be losing sleep over at night. But it's also a growing trend that I'm just not fond of. It's okay to be pop, it's okay to be alternative, but it's also okay to say that there's a difference between the two. My favorite band doesn't like labels. Well, aren't you special? Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Check out my alternative versus alternative rock video at this link right here, or tap here for another recent video. All of my socials, including my Patreon, can be found in the description down below. Thank you for supporting me, and I will see you soon for more right here on Beyond ARTV.